Every day we wear masks, respond to roles, play parts. We are friends, children, workers, lovers, strangers. But who are we really, underneath it all? What remains when the noise of the world fades and we're left alone with ourselves? That's the question, simple yet merciless, that marks the beginning of Carl Gustav Jung's search. Not an academic quest, but a descent into the abyss of the soul. Jung didn't want to label human beings. He wanted to understand them, in their deep movement, in the invisible mechanics that guide them. We are not all the same. Some people move through the world as if their center were outside themselves. They live through the eyes of others, feed on stimulation, seek confrontation, reaction, response. Others, by contrast, seem to inhabit an internal landscape. They walk through their minds, speak more to themselves than to others, seek silence, depth, the invisible truth. Jung called this first distinction extroversion and introversion, but not in the shallow sense of being sociable or shy. It's an existential mode. It's about where your psychic energy flows, outward or inward. And it's not a choice, it's an imprint. But that alone isn't enough. Within each of us are different forces that shape how we perceive the world and make decisions. Some rely on the senses, what they see, touch, measure. They live in the concrete, in the here and now. Others orient themselves through intuition. They grasp invisible patterns, future possibilities, subtle connections. These are two different perceptive modes, two forms of attention. Neither is superior, but each generates a distinct way of being in the world. The sensing person anchors themselves in reality, seeks safety, solidity. The intuitive person dances with uncertainty, lives on visions, and sometimes risks losing touch with the immediate. Then comes the matter of decision-making. What drives our choices? For some, it's thought, logic, rational coherence. For others, it's feeling, not in the sense of fleeting emotion, but as value, as inner principle. Some decide based on what is right by reason, others based on what feels right in the heart. Here too, Jung doesn't judge. He describes, he observes, he understands. And he shows us how these functions, thinking, feeling, sensing, intuiting, combine with the direction of energy to form four major personality orientations, not as labels to wear, but as maps to help us find ourselves. Because the truth about who you are isn't found in a test or a category. It lies in how you move through the world, in the kinds of questions you ask, in your recurring struggles, in your silent joys. Psychological types aren't cages, but mirrors. And by looking into them, maybe for the first time, we begin to understand something about ourselves no one ever explained. Jung doesn't give us prepackaged answers. He gives us a tool for truly listening to ourselves. And when you begin to listen, you stop imitating. You stop judging yourself for not being like others, and you start living according to your unique form, perhaps fragile, perhaps strange, but real. Imagine four people crossing the same bridge on the same day, under the same sky. Yet each one experiences that moment in a radically different way. That's what Jung invites us to see. The world doesn't change. We encounter it through different inner structures. The four psychological types he proposes aren't rigid boxes, but deep relational modes between the soul and reality. They're like lenses through which we filter the world, often without knowing it. Some live with the concreteness of sensation. For them, reality is what can be seen, touched, heard. They are attentive to details, to objects, to matter. Not because they're superficial, but because their consciousness is rooted in tangible experience. They live in the present as the only possible time, and from that presence draw safety, stability, orientation. The world for them has weight, color, a specific smell. If they can't perceive it, it doesn't feel real. They're like artisans of existence. They build, observe, measure. Their truth lies in things as they are. Then there are those who move by intuition. They don't look at what is. They look at what could be. They live immersed in possibilities, in symbols, in invisible connections between seemingly unrelated events. They are visionary, but also restless. Always one step ahead, rarely still. Where the sensing type asks, "What's here?" the intuitive asks, "Where could this lead?" They are explorers of futures, sometimes at the cost of losing touch with the now. They don't see the world as it is, but as it might become. They live in a constant dream and don't always know how to land. Then there are those who decide based on thinking, not because they ignore emotions, but because they seek order, coherence, structure. Life, for them, is a matter of logic, of impersonal truth. They want to understand how the world works. They want their decisions to make sense, to follow a line. Thought is not coldness, it's fidelity to clarity. This type seeks rules, not to submit to them, but to test them, improve them, replace them if necessary. Their danger is emotional distance, the temptation to reduce life to a formula. But their strength is integrity. They do what they believe is right, even when it costs them. Finally, there are those who decide through feeling, not impulsively, but as a coherent response to a system of values. This type feels deeply, but is not ruled by emotion. They're guided by meaning, authenticity, inner resonance. Before acting, they ask, is it human? Is it right for me? Is it true to who I am? They are the most empathetic and also the most vulnerable to pain. They live every relationship, every word, every glance intensely. And when they betray themselves, it feels like a physical wound. They don't seek logic, they seek meaning. And often they find it, even where others see nothing. These four paths intersect, blend, influence each other. No one is just one thing. No one is trapped in a single type. But there's always a dominant function that guides our way of being in the world, and others that remain in shadow. Jung doesn't tell us who we must be. He invites us to discover who we already are, and to give space to what we've ignored. Because only by knowing our type can we begin to listen to the parts we've never nurtured. There, in the tension between who we are and who we could be, the deepest truth is born. Not one that boxes you in, but one that opens you, that calls you to become something more whole. Knowing your psychological type isn't an endpoint, it's a starting point. Not to close yourself in a definition, but to open yourself to a possibility. Jung didn't offer us a theory to justify our behavior, but a compass to navigate the chaos of the psyche. Knowing you are intuitive, or sensing, or thinking, or feeling is only useful if that awareness drives you to grow, to expand, to break out of autopilot. Because each of us has a dominant function, yes, but within us also lie the others, dormant, forgotten, denied. And in those inferior functions often lies the key to transformation. Personality, according to Jung, is not a fixed structure. It's a process, a becoming. And that becoming is driven by a deep urge to become whole. Not perfect, not invincible, but capable of inhabiting all our dimensions, even those that frighten us. The intuitive who learns to touch reality, the sensing type who starts to dream, the thinker who listens to the heart, the feeling type who embraces logic. That's where true inner alchemy happens. When you stop being a slave to your dominant function and start welcoming the others as living parts of you. But it's not easy. Because the inferior functions arrive with discomfort, effort, clumsiness. They're like unused limbs. At first, they hurt. You feel out of place, as if you're betraying yourself. And yet it's right there, in the awkwardness of the new, that something unknown begins to grow. The shadow is not the enemy. It's the part of you that you've ignored. It's what can save you if you listen to it. That's why Jung never limited himself to typology. For him, knowing your type served only one purpose: to begin a journey of integration, toward individuation, toward becoming yourself, not the comfortable, socially acceptable version, but the authentic one, the one that unites light and shadow, strength and fragility, intuition and flesh. Discovering who you are isn't about finding a label. It's about accepting that you are a set of tensions, opposing desires, inner conflicts. And instead of repressing them, you learn to listen. It's not about fixing who you are, but welcoming what's missing. Your personality isn't a refuge. It's a starting point to explore everything you can become. The truth of who you are isn't hidden in one function, but in the way you relate to all parts of your psyche, even the ones you've excluded. When Jung says the task of man is to become whole, he doesn't mean to build an ideal self. He means to become real, able to exist without pretenses, able to choose, not out of habit, but out of consciousness. When you learn to recognize your inner modes, you stop judging those of others. You realize not everyone has to function like you, and you start to respect diversity not as a threat, but as richness. Your truth is not absolute. It's one of the many forms that consciousness can take.